Lucas Brooks sat at his desk, the soft hum of fluorescent lights above blending with the clack of keyboards in the busy office of Belmont and Company, a prestigious finance firm known for its impeccable reputation. At 27, Lucas had found himself a place in the fast-paced world of corporate finance, a junior analyst buried deep in spreadsheets and data. He wasn't the office favorite, never attending happy hours or making small talk at the water cooler. He wasn't looking for friends, he was looking for numbers. And numbers, as he knew, never lie. But one Monday morning, as Lucas ran his routine checks on several high-profile client accounts, something felt off. It started small, a few irregularities here and there, just enough to make him stop and double-check. Payments routed through offshore accounts with no clear explanation, invoice amounts that didn't match the recorded transactions, vendor names that seemed oddly generic, with no website or contact details to verify. At first, he thought it might just be a mistake, a glitch in the system. But as the days went on, the anomalies grew, multiplying like a crack in the foundation of a skyscraper. Lucas couldn't ignore it any longer. There was something bigger happening, something shady buried beneath the numbers. He knew better than to make a scene. After all, he was just a junior analyst, a cog in the wheel of a company that prided itself on secrecy and smooth operations. So, he did what any cautious analyst would do. He started documenting everything. He took detailed notes, highlighted discrepancies, and created a spreadsheet to track the patterns. His gut told him this wasn't just a one-off error, it was a carefully constructed system of fraudulent transactions, something that could ruin the firm if anyone ever discovered it. But who would believe him? He was new, unnoticed. And worse, if he was right, those behind the scheme were powerful people. What started as curiosity soon turned into a quiet obsession. The more he uncovered, the more Lucas realized he was staring at something dangerous. Yet, as the discrepancies piled up, so did his dread. What would happen if someone found out what he'd discovered? What would happen to him? Lucas spent the next few days diving deeper into the accounts he had flagged, tracking each transaction with increasing intensity. The more he looked, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just a series of mistakes or isolated errors. It was a well-orchestrated operation, one that spanned across several high-profile clients. Payments were consistently routed to offshore accounts with the same untraceable destinations. Shell companies were involved in nearly every transaction, their names common enough to blend in, yet their presence was too frequent to be a coincidence. The amounts were just slightly inflated, but over time, those small discrepancies added up. As Lucas pieced everything together, his heart sank. He calculated the total sum of all these misdirected funds, $6 million. $6 million funneled through a network of fake companies and hidden accounts, undetected for who knew how long. The scale of the fraud was staggering. This wasn't a small oversight. It was a deliberate scheme, one that, if exposed, could shake the very foundation of Belmont and Company. The realization hit him hard. He had stumbled upon something far bigger than he had ever imagined. People had carefully built this network to evade detection, using the firm's name to launder money. The consequences were immense, not just for the firm, but for the people involved. Powerful figures, people with influence, were behind this. They had likely been using Belmont's reputation to cover up their own operations. The gravity of what he had uncovered weighed heavily on him. He was just an analyst, a small part of a much bigger machine. What would happen if he reported this? Would anyone believe him? He could already feel the eyes of the company on him, questioning his motives. Could he really expose them? Or should he let it go, walk away quietly, and hope that someone else would pick up the pieces? But that wasn't who Lucas was, and his conscience wouldn't let him ignore it. Yet the fear gnawed at him. He paced around his apartment, the weight of the decision pressing on him. The firm's executives, the clients involved, they were powerful, influential people. They could bury this, make him disappear. His mind raced through every possible scenario. If he went to the authorities, what would happen to him? His career would be over. He'd be blacklisted, labeled a troublemaker. But if he did nothing, the fraud would continue, the money would keep flowing, and no one would ever know the truth. Finally, Lucas made the decision. He had to tell someone. But who? Who could he trust with such explosive information? The answer came to him quickly. His boss, Jordan Matthews. Jordan ran the company's finance division. He was well-known, sharp, and always well-dressed. Jordan was also known for being quick-tempered and deeply protective of Belmont's reputation. If anyone would be able to help him navigate this, it would be Jordan. Lucas scheduled a meeting for the next afternoon. His hands trembled slightly as he gathered the documents, knowing that what he was about to present could change everything. When he walked into Jordan's office, the air was thick with tension. Jordan glanced up from his computer, his sharp eyes narrowing as Lucas placed the folder on the desk. "This is serious, Jordan," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "I found something. Something big." Jordan flipped through the pages, his face unreadable. As he reached the last sheet, he paused, his hand lingering on the folder. Then he closed it with a soft snap. "These are high-value clients, Lucas," Jordan said, his voice calm but firm. "Don't ask questions that you don't need answers to." Lucas froze, a knot forming in his stomach. He had hoped for more, but the dismissal was unmistakable. The words felt like a punch to the gut. He had hoped to find an ally, someone who would help him take this further. Instead, it seemed like his fears were becoming reality. He was on his own. The next morning, as the clock struck 9 a.m., Lucas's phone buzzed on his desk, pulling him out of his deep thoughts. It was an internal number. He picked up, expecting a routine request for a report or a clarification on something. Instead, it was a call from Human Resources. "Lucas, this is Karen from HR," the voice on the other end said, too cheerful for the situation. "I need you to come by the office for a quick meeting." "Is everything okay?" he asked, his heart racing. "Yes, Lucas. Unfortunately, we've had to make some cuts due to company restructuring. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. You'll be receiving a severance package, and we ask that you clean out your desk by noon today." Lucas sat frozen for a moment, the words sinking in slowly, his mind struggling to make sense of it. He had known this day might come, but to hear those words from someone in HR, hit him like a punch to the gut. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "Okay," was all he managed to say before the line went dead. The severance package didn't matter. Not at that moment. He had spent the last few days meticulously documenting the fraudulent transactions, uncovering patterns in the data that pointed to a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. And now, here he was, being shown the door. A man who had been dedicated, who had followed the rules, who had always given 110%, dismissed without warning. Lucas walked to his desk in a daze. His co-workers around him were busy with their own tasks, some of them oblivious to the shift in his life, others exchanging quick glances when they saw him packing up his things. He tried to block out the sting of their indifferent faces, but it was impossible. He gathered his personal items, photos of his grandmother, a few books he had kept on the shelf for comfort, and neatly placed them in a cardboard box. It all felt surreal, as if this wasn't really happening. But it was. He had been dismissed, not for incompetence, not for anything he had done wrong, but because he had uncovered something that no one wanted to deal with. As he stood there, looking at the empty space around him, Lucas felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The firm he had trusted, the people he had worked alongside for the past 2 years, had just discarded him. It wasn't just about losing his job. It was about the message they had sent. Don't ask questions, don't rock the boat. People with power, with influence, were playing their games behind the scenes, and anyone who dared expose them would pay the price. His suspicions had been correct. The scheme wasn't just isolated to 1 or 2 people. There were others involved, people much higher up in the company, possibly even those sitting in the corner offices. Someone had worked hard to ensure the fraudulent transactions went unnoticed, and that someone had now ensured that Lucas was silenced. As he continued to pack up his things, Lucas's mind began to clear. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't walk away from this. He couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. The fraud he had uncovered wasn't just about money. It was about ethics, about doing what was right even when it came at a personal cost. "I won't be another Trevor," he muttered to himself as he grabbed the last of his things from his desk. Trevor had been another analyst at Belmont and Company, someone who had raised concerns about the accounts but had been let go without explanation. Lucas had always thought Trevor had made a mistake, but now he wondered if Trevor had seen the same things he had. If Trevor had asked the same questions, And if that was why he was gone, Lucas's resolve hardened. He wasn't going to let this go. He wasn't going to be one of those people who turned a blind eye, who stayed silent because the consequences seemed too great. The truth had to come out, no matter what it cost him. He would be the one to expose the lies, to bring the real story to light. Before he left the office, he made a final decision. He opened his laptop, downloaded all the files he had been working on, and copied them to a secure drive. Every transaction, every pattern, every discrepancy, all of it was documented. If this went any further, if he needed to prove what had happened, he would have the evidence. He couldn't just walk away. He had to ensure that the truth didn't stay buried with the company. With the box of his belongings in hand and the secure drive safely tucked in his jacket pocket, Lucas left the office. As he passed through the front doors, he took one last look at the building, at the place that had once felt like a stepping stone to his future. But now, it felt like a prison. "I won't be silenced," he whispered to himself, stepping out into the cold Chicago air. His next move was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to stop until the truth was known. The weight of his decision settled over Lucas like a fog. He had been fired, his future uncertain, and now he stood at a crossroads, facing a dilemma that could define the rest of his life. Should he take the next step and expose the fraud he had uncovered, or should he walk away? The fear of retribution, of ruining his career, gnawed at him. He'd already lost his job. Going public would surely end any chance of ever working in finance again. The firm had resources, influence, and powerful clients who could easily bury someone like him. His friends and family weren't much help. His best friend, Rachel, had listened to his story with an air of disbelief. After a long pause, she had shaken her head. "Lucas, let it go. Find another job. This is too much. They'll ruin you if you go after them. Do you really want to risk everything for a few $1,000,000 that isn't yours to begin with?" She'd said it softly, but the underlying message was clear: let it go and move on. But Lucas couldn't. The words of his grandmother echoed in his mind, louder than Rachel's pragmatic advice. She had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 12. She was the one who taught him about integrity, about doing what was right, even when it was hard. "People may lie, Lucas," she had always said, "but numbers don't. The truth will always show itself in the data, and if you follow it, you'll find what's really happening." Her voice was a constant presence in his life, and in that moment, it cut through the doubt and fear swirling in his mind. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't ignore it. The truth mattered more than his career. But how could he go about exposing something this big? Belmont and Company was just one player in a much larger game, and Lucas knew he couldn't fight this alone. He needed help. His mind turned to Kate Walsh, a compliance officer who had worked at Belmont for over a decade. She was known for her thoroughness, her ability to connect the dots where others couldn't, and more importantly, her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. He had crossed paths with Kate a few times at the office. She was a hard person to miss, always serious, always focused. He'd once seen her intercept a misfiled document, and without hesitation, she had flagged it and ensured it got to the right department. She had a reputation for being meticulous and reliable. She was the kind of person who could be trusted with something this serious. Lucas found her contact information in his old phone and hesitated for a moment before dialing. The phone rang a few times before she picked up. "Kate Walsh." Her voice was firm but warm. "Kate, it's Lucas Brooks," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need to talk to you about something. It's important." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Lucas?" she asked, recognizing his name. "What's going on? Are you okay?" I'm not okay," Lucas replied, his throat tightening. "I found something big. I think Belmont is involved in something illegal. Fraud. Money laundering. I need your help." Kate was quiet for a moment, and Lucas could hear the shift in her tone. "I don't know, Lucas. You know the rules. If you have proof of something, you have to go through the proper channels. This is dangerous territory. If you're serious about this, you need to be prepared for the consequences." "I know," he said, swallowing hard. "I've already lost my job. But this is bigger than me. I need to make sure it doesn't happen again." She sighed, the weight of his words settling between them. "All right, I'll meet with you. But I'm warning you, Lucas, this is not something to take lightly. There's no turning back once you get involved." The line went quiet, and Lucas stared at his phone for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. At least he wasn't alone in this anymore. They agreed to meet the next day, and as Lucas walked through the quiet streets of Chicago, his thoughts raced. The evidence he had uncovered was just the beginning. As he began to dig deeper into the transactions, he found that the fraudulent activity stretched far beyond what he initially thought. Shell companies were just the tip of the iceberg. More names appeared: global networks, powerful figures tied to international corporations, and hidden accounts in places Lucas had never heard of before. The scope of it was staggering. Lucas traced some of the transactions to accounts that were tied to real estate developments in foreign countries, pharmaceutical companies with questionable connections, and even some high-end luxury goods firms. The total amount laundered was far greater than he'd ever imagined, $10 million, at least. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, it became clear that Belmont and Company was just one cog in a much larger machine. He had to know who was pulling the strings, who was orchestrating the entire operation. But with every new lead he followed, the trail got colder. He realized that what he had uncovered wasn't just corporate fraud, it was a global conspiracy. Belmont and Company wasn't the mastermind, it was a small player, a pawn in a game that reached further than he could ever have anticipated. His heart pounded in his chest as he sat down to go over the evidence once more. What was he getting himself into? Could he really go public with this? Could he trust Kate to help him bring the truth to light? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't turn back now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Lucas met Kate in a small, nondescript cafe on the edge of the city. The room was quiet, a far cry from the chaos in his mind. He had spent hours going through the evidence one last time before leaving his apartment, making sure everything was in order. As he sat down across from her, his heart raced. He wasn't sure what to expect from Kate, but her calm demeanor brought him a small sense of comfort. She had always been someone who valued rules and integrity, but he could see the hesitation in her eyes as she flipped through the documents he handed her. Kate took her time, scanning through the pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was meticulous as always, but Lucas could tell this wasn't just about following procedure. This was bigger. She paused, looking up from the folder. "This is..." Kate hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "This is huge, Lucas. If this is what you say it is, it's not just a corporate scandal. It's a criminal conspiracy. And it could bring down entire networks. But these people, whoever's behind this, they're untouchable." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of concern in it. Lucas could see the fear behind her calm exterior. She had seen things before, but this was different. "You're talking about powerful people. People who have the means to protect themselves. If this goes public, there's no telling how far they'll go to make sure it stays buried." Kate paused again, her gaze hardening. "This could destroy you, Lucas. And worse, you could put your family at risk. These people won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their empire. If you make a move, they'll come for you. And they'll make sure you regret it." Lucas felt the weight of her words sink in, and for a moment, he thought about walking away. He thought about his grandmother, the one person in his life who had always believed in him, who had taught him to do the right thing no matter the cost. But Kate's warning lingered in his mind like a shadow. Could he really risk everything? Could he put the people he loved in danger just to expose the truth? But then he thought back to the moment when he first uncovered the fraud, the small irregularities that had led him down this path. He thought about the $6 million he had already tracked, and the 10 million more that had been funneled through the system. He thought about the lives that were affected by this, the people who didn't even know they were being hurt by a global money laundering operation. How could he walk away from that? How could he look the other way? "I know the risks, Kate," Lucas said, his voice firm. "But I can't let this go. I have the evidence. And my conscience won't let me ignore it. I have to do something." Kate stared at him for a long moment, her eyes studying him carefully. She knew he wasn't going to back down. She had seen the determination in his eyes when he first walked in. She had seen it in his file when she worked at Belmont. Lucas was a man who couldn't be swayed by fear or temptation. He was the kind of person who believed in doing what was right, no matter the cost. Kate sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "All right," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "But you need to understand what you're getting into. Once you go to the authorities, there's no going back, and you need to be prepared for the consequences." Lucas nodded. He had already made up his mind. He wasn't turning back. He wasn't just going to expose the fraud, he was going to bring down the people who were behind it. That evening, after he left the cafe, Lucas sat down at his laptop. He encrypted the documents he had gathered, making sure the files were secure. He then composed an email to a trusted contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He had met Agent Harding during a seminar on financial crime a year ago, and he had kept her contact information. She had been a reliable source of information on several smaller cases in the past, but this was different. This wasn't just a minor case of fraud. This was a global conspiracy. With a deep breath, Lucas hit send. The email was simple, just a few words to make sure Agent Harding understood the urgency of the situation. "I have uncovered a large-scale fraud operation involving multiple firms and powerful individuals. Attached are the documents and evidence. Please contact me as soon as possible." He sat there, staring at the screen, knowing that there was no turning back now. He had just made the decision to go public with everything. The next morning, the fallout began. Lucas was still groggy from lack of sleep when his phone buzzed, waking him up. It was a call from his lawyer, Aidan Thompson. "Lucas, I've just been briefed. Belmont and Company has started sending legal threats. They're accusing you of theft, breach of confidentiality, and defamation. They've sent me a cease and desist letter, demanding you return all company documents immediately." Lucas felt his heart drop into his stomach. He had known this was coming, but hearing it confirmed made it real. They were going to try to bury him. They were going to use every legal tool at their disposal to silence him. Aidan's voice was calm but firm. "They'll try to make you look like a criminal, Lucas. They'll do whatever it takes to discredit you. But we have the evidence, and they can't change that." Lucas nodded, feeling the walls close in around him. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. But at the same time, a sense of resolve washed over him. He had made his choice. He wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to let them win. "I'm not stopping, Aidan," he said quietly, his voice steady. "We have to see this through." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Aidan spoke again, his tone softening. "I know. And I'll be here to help you every step of the way." As Lucas hung up the phone, he took a deep breath. He had made his decision, and now there was no going back. The battle had only just begun. But he knew one thing for sure, he wasn't going to let the truth be buried. The next few days were a blur of activity. Lucas couldn't believe it when he received a call from Agent Harding at the FBI. The agency had officially launched an investigation into the financial crimes he had exposed. The documents he had sent, along with his testimony, had been pivotal in setting the wheels in motion. He had done it. He had taken the first step toward bringing down the operation that had been hiding in plain sight for so long. From the safety of his apartment, Lucas watched the unfolding events. The news reports flashed across his screen, FBI agents raiding Belmont and Company's offices, seizing financial records, and questioning employees. There was no turning back now. The building that had once felt like a place of promise now felt like a battleground, a symbol of everything Lucas had once thought was unshakable. He felt a strange sense of vindication as he watched agents swarming the office, their faces grim as they worked to uncover the full scope of the fraud. But with that victory came the realization that things were about to get much harder for him. The people involved in the scheme were powerful, with connections that reached far beyond the walls of Belmont and Company and its clients. Lucas could feel the pressure building around him as he went about his day, trying to stay under the radar. It didn't take long for the threats to start. At first, they were subtle, missed calls from unknown numbers, followed by a voicemail with nothing but a long, heavy silence on the other end. But soon, the threats became direct and explicit. One evening, as Lucas sat at his kitchen table, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. "You're making a mistake, Lucas. Walk away now, and we'll forget this ever happened. The message was chilling. Lucas's hands trembled as he read it, his pulse quickening. He glanced out of his apartment window, expecting to see nothing, but his eyes caught sight of a black sedan parked across the street. It had been there for hours, stationary, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. It wasn't the first time he had noticed a car following him. It wasn't the first time he had felt watched. His stomach knotted with fear, but it was quickly replaced by something else, determination. He had already come this far. There was no turning back now. He couldn't be intimidated. He couldn't give in to fear. These people were dangerous, but Lucas knew that if he didn't continue the fight, they would keep doing what they had been doing for years, hurting the vulnerable, exploiting the system, and destroying lives for profit. Lucas called his lawyer, Aidan Thompson, later that night. The firm's legal attacks had already begun. Aidan had warned him it would get ugly, but hearing the weight of the accusations in the lawyer's voice made it feel all too real. Belmont and Company was fighting back, accusing Lucas of everything from theft to breach of confidentiality, trying to paint him as the villain in this story. They were relentless, sending cease and desist letters, and threatening lawsuits if he didn't retract his statement. "You're doing the right thing, Lucas," Aidan had said during their call. "They'll try to drag your name through the mud, but they won't win. You have the FBI behind you now, and that's more than they can handle." Lucas wasn't so sure. The legal threats were mounting, and every time he left his apartment, the black sedans seemed to be closer, their presence a reminder of how much danger he was in. He had been warned by Kate, by Aidan, but the stakes had only grown higher. Yet with each passing day, Lucas's resolve grew stronger. He had seen the truth, and he could not ignore it. This was bigger than him. It wasn't just about his career, it was about justice. The next morning, Lucas was watching the news when a familiar face appeared on the screen. It was Agent Harding, speaking to reporters outside Belmont and Company. She confirmed that the firm was under investigation, and that several top executives had already been detained for questioning. But as she spoke, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the air. The battle was no longer just about exposing fraud. It was about protecting himself and those around him. His life was at risk. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Stay out of this, and we'll forget you ever existed." This time, the words felt more like a warning than a threat. But Lucas wasn't backing down. "I can't," he whispered to himself, clutching his phone tightly. He wasn't afraid anymore. With Aidan's support and the FBI on his side, he knew this fight was just beginning. He had already made it this far. There was no going back now. The road ahead would be dangerous, but Lucas was ready. He had come this far, and he would keep going, no matter the cost. The aftermath of the investigation unfolded quickly. The FBI's thorough work led to the arrest of several key players, including Jordan Matthews, the CFO of Belmont and Company, and a handful of top-level executives. The firm that once seemed untouchable was now crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. The media covered the story extensively, casting a spotlight on the fraud that had been happening behind closed doors for years. The story was everywhere, and Lucas became known as the whistleblower who had exposed the truth. Despite the media frenzy, Lucas felt a strange sense of calm. The attention, though overwhelming, was nothing compared to the relief he felt knowing that justice was finally being served. He had feared that his life would be defined by the chaos that followed his decision, but instead, he found himself at peace with what he had done. He had risked everything, his career, his reputation, his safety, but in the end, he had made a real difference. Soon after, Lucas received an unexpected offer from a smaller, more ethical finance firm. The CEO had heard about his role in the case and admired his integrity. The offer was generous, and more importantly, it was a chance for Lucas to start fresh in an environment that valued his principles. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was where he belonged. As Lucas settled into his new job, he took some time to reflect on everything he had been through. One quiet afternoon, he drove to the cemetery where his grandmother was buried. Standing by her grave, he whispered to the wind, "I trusted my gut." He could almost hear her voice in the back of his mind, reminding him that the truth always comes to light, even when it seems impossible to find. In the epilogue of his journey, Lucas found himself in a coffee shop, reviewing quarterly reports for his new firm. Across from him sat a young analyst, eager to learn. Lucas smiled, remembering how he had been in his shoes not too long ago. As they discussed the importance of noticing patterns in the data and always doing what's right, Lucas realized that his journey had come full circle. He wasn't just mentoring a new generation of analysts, he was living proof that doing the right thing, no matter the cost, could change everything.